I have this like theory for breaking down like a broad general rule for what makes a character, or honestly anything, a weapon, a class, whatever applies to your specific game. What makes it one strong and one weak. So the way that I look at it is this: is there's three distinctions. We're gonna start out with the mid, like top, mid, and bottom tier character. Let's just say characters because we've been talking about fighting games. So we're going to start out with the beginning with the mid-tier. It'll make sense in a second. So mid-tier characters, the whole range of the mid-tiers, have strengths and weaknesses. Like, yeah, of course. Well, hang on. So the strengths and weaknesses, for the most part, do not interact with each other. They do not have that much of an effect on each other. A top-tier character is a character whose strengths cancel out their weaknesses. They nullify them. And vice versa, a bottom tier character, a low tier, is one whose weaknesses nullify their strengths. So let's think about this with some examples. A character like Dudley from Third Strike. When you look at Dudley on paper, and Dudley is a very good character, but I think he's a good example because he's a very strong character in that game, but he's not top tier. He's kind of just outside of the gate of top tier for a very specific reason. When you look at Dudley on paper, he's got a million things going for him. He has great pokes, he has great space control, good anti-airs, he's got plus frames. He's got good combo damage. If he a lot of his routes lead into a knockdown, which leads into unreactable high-low 50-50 mix-ups. He can work in like a throw into there. You can do strike throw, low, low high kind of thing. He can force you to deal with it because he has the rows, which makes parry timing extremely funky. What else? There's probably other stuff. He has like a weird low jump arc, which makes it difficult to react to. He has really good jump ins with like jump heavy kick. He's got like so much stuff. I think, did I mention his plus frames? Because his plus frames, dude, he's got so much stuff. Fast moves, great close range, good, like everything, right? So like, why isn't he top tier? He doesn't have a good special cancelable low poke. Like straight up. If Dudley had a special cancelable low poke, even one that was like sort of mediocre, he would be insane. He'd be like easily in the contention for top 3. Because his strengths are so overwhelming. But he has this massive gap in this in his moveset, which essentially kind of forces his entire character to revolve around it, right? Like, he's so good against most of the cast, but against Chun-Li, who has a weirdly low crouching hurt box, half of his shit just whiffs on her. Because Dudley he's all like Marisa, in that he's really good at controlling the space and dealing damage to things right in front of his face, like eye level. Once you get lower below the waist, at the knees, he kind of struggles. He's got, like, his sweep is very short range. His crouch heavy kick launcher thing is a good move in its own way, but it's not, like, a really, it can be used as a poke, but it's, like, it's weird, It wouldn't really be your first choice. So, all of these strengths and this one big weakness, that's, like, how Dudley is designed. I think Dudley is a fantastically designed character. I feel like if every character in Third Strike was as strong, like at the power level of Dudley, I think it would be like a perfectly balanced game. But they're not. Now let's look at like so like Dudley has like all these strengths and he's got one weakness, and there isn't that much relation between the two of them. It's just a hole he has in his game plan, right? You can, like, very common ones will be, especially with characters that I play, for instance, is, this character has great close range damage output. Like, they're really good at close range, but they don't have very good approach options, like, it's a give and take, because you can have both. It's usually just called a rushdown character. You can have both really good close range tools and good approach options. A top tier character is a character who has strengths that nullify their weaknesses. So let's take a look at a character like Zappa from Plus R. Who I almost want to make a video about this, just so I can show like visual examples. I came up with this specifically, like this whole system I came up with because I got really annoyed at the way that the old Dust Loop pages said some stuff about like Zappa and Testament, like the top tiers in Plus R. So like Dust Loop used to have, it might be different depending on like what specific game you're looking at now, but for at least for Plus R, what they used to have was a strengths and weaknesses like box section at the top of the character's page. And now I think it's like pros and cons, like play this character if you like this, avoid them if you don't like this, or something like that. Which I think is a better system, because the strengths and weaknesses thing was like sometimes they were really scrounging for them. Zappa I got really annoyed because that character is fucked up. That character is fucked up in that game. And when you would look at his weaknesses on Dust Loop, all that they could come up with was like, bad aerial approach options, low combo damage. And I read that, I'm like, that's complete bullshit. Not that it's wrong. It's not that Zappa does have good aerial approach options. It's that Zappa is never in a situation where he has to even think about that. Because Zappa, with his summons, controls the entire screen. Zappa never has to air dash at you. What the fuck? He never has to do that. He fucking sits there with sword or dog out, and he just locks down the entire screen, and you have to like fight like you're on fucking Normandy your way through across the stage. Zappa never has to deal with the fact that he doesn't have good jump-ins. Like I can't even think of a time when Zappa has like jumped in on me within a move or something. Right? It's never a problem for him. He never has to deal with it because his strengths just nullify the need for it. Also, the thing about him having like low combo damage, it's like, yeah, I guess, but it's never that big of a problem for him because, well, one, like with certain summons, specifically Sword, he's resetting you so often. Like, I'll just take so many little random hits from getting mixed up because he has full screen, unblockable, nigh unreactable sometimes, high-low mix-ups with the Sword. Unburstable, by the way. He can combo you from full screen. And, no hurtbox, completely disjointed. Awesome character, Herxus. And it's like, you get reset so much that, like, he just doesn't have to... Pulsar has some pretty intense damage scaling. Like, combo damage scaling. Zappa never has to deal with it, because he just gets so many fresh hits on you all the time. Like, he never has to be forced to deal with it. To go back to Third Strike, because I think that game is a good example for this, because it has so many... It really runs the gamut between absolute bottom tiers and absolute god tiers. So you look at, like, Chun-Li, generally agreed upon best character in that game. What are her weaknesses? Well, she has kind of mediocre special moves. She has, like, serviceable anti-airs. Her EX moves aren't that great. I'm pretty sure she has like low health or something like that. And like a lot, honestly, like a lot of Chun-Li's kit is mediocre. It's not amazing. But she has crouching medium kick into Super R2. And legitimately that carries the entire character. Chun-Li is, I describe her as like 3 moves stapled together. It's crouching medium kick, stand heavy punch, and SA2. So, like, does Chun-Li ever have to... Like, Chun-Li never has to feel the effects of having a mediocre sweep or something like that. Because crouch heavy kick, SA2. Like, it just completely blows every other thing out of the water. The character centers around it. It's the axis around which the entire strategy revolves. Build up a bar of super, zone them out, and then try and land a hit and confirm it into super. You deal like 40%, you win in 2 hits. It's so like that is a top tier character. That's a top tier character. And then you look all the way at the bottom tier, and you look at someone like 12, right? And 12 on paper, I really like a breakdown that Befale wrote one time in like a YouTube comments section, which is that Chun-Li and 12, 12. I was almost gonna say Q. You have those like weirdo characters with short names, but no, Chun-Li and 12 are kind of like opposite ends of the same coin. Opposite sides of the same coin. In that they are both characters who kind of feel like experiments from the devs to see how much you can make a character revolve around a specific small amount of tools in their kit and be viable. And they are totally polar opposites. Chun-Li is the best character in the game. 12 is arguably one of the worst. It's usually like him and Sean, and I think it might be 12 to be honest. And you look at 12 on paper. Again, you look at 12 on paper and you're like, okay, he has pretty interesting, unique pressure with like his air dash and all that. He has some really good normals. He's got like stand heavy kick. He's got jump heavy punch. That's a good jump in. Got like good pokes, like stand medium punch. Some like pretty solid, some solid normals, right? And he can convert. Well, he can only really convert like some of them. And then when he does 0 damage. 12 does like absolutely no damage. Like a full combo from 12 deals as much as like a fucking heavy attack from Hugo. It's like ridiculous. Like one heavy punch from Hugo. Maybe less. Like it is pitiful the amount of damage he does. So it means that like no matter what, like no matter how many times, no matter how strong 12's offense can be, if someone really knows how to play him, and there are people who can really put in work with that character because they worked really hard to get to that point with him. But like he has to work so hard because his weaknesses of just like absolute dog shit damage and extremely low conversion ability make his strengths of his like offense and his rushdown potential almost null and void, like almost pointless. A character like Victor from Vampire Savior, also very much like that. Like, oh, he's a grappler with some pretty good strike throw, but he's like slow as fuck and he can't get in. And you get in and you get a command throw, and now you're full screen again because of the like launch back after it's done. And it's like now you have to work your way in again, and it's like he just never catches a break. He never catches a break. Even when he gets to use his strengths, they put him in a bad situation afterwards. Yeah. That's how I generally think of it. Like I think it's pretty consistent if you look across a lot of different games. That like to reiterate, a mid-tier is a character with strengths and weaknesses that don't really affect each other. A top tier is a character with strengths that cancel out their weaknesses. And a bottom tier is a character with weaknesses that cancel out their strengths. You could probably think of examples right now of things that fit this description. And now I think it's interesting when you go from like the mid-tier up, because, you know, people break it down like this character is, you know, they're like lower mid-tier. They're like upper mid-tier kind of thing. And I think in that regard, the more it becomes like kind of like a gradient. It becomes a spectrum where the characters who again, Third Strike is a great example of this. Q has insane damage. He can be crazy tanky because of his taunt. He has a couple really good buttons, but it's really hard for him to convert, and he's just really slow. Like, he's just sluggish with a lot of shit. He's got a lot of really cool tech. He's got a lot of cool stuff he can do. So he's not bottom tier, but his weaknesses are pretty glaring for what his strengths are. And you start to go higher and higher up the chain, and you get to characters who have strengths that generally outshine their weaknesses. Someone like Dudley, right? Basically, usually considered like top, around the top of mid tier, or like A tier at least, high tier. He's like a high tier character. That's what I'd consider. Everyone from like that C tier to A tier, I would say, is kind of like the middle range. And then you got like D is the bottom and S is the top, just for this example. Like, that's kind of how I think of it. A is like the top of the mids, like very good. That's how I generally think of it. Yeah, let me know in the comments what you guys think about that, because I've been thinking about that for a while. And I like thinking about characters in relationship to that. So, like, for instance, is Aki, like, where does Aki place on the tier list? Well, actually, I think it might even be a little early to tell. I'd be really curious to see what she's like with maybe a month or two more of development and people figuring stuff out with her. But for the most part, just from observation and not being able to play the character yet, she looks like a character who has some very strong high points. Yeah, she feels like a mid tier. She feels like a pretty good mid tier that requires some dedication to learn. Like, her high points are really good, but her low points are weird, like kind of limited conversion ability. But if you're in specific situations, her conversion ability can be like insane, and her combo routes can be like nutty. She doesn't have that many ways of using the system mechanics of Street Fighter 6 very well. Like, her drive rush isn't amazing. It's not one of the. It's fine, drive rush, forward heavy kick, the jump kicks. Yeah, it's all right. But I don't think she's terrible. I don't think she's like. I think the idea that she's low tier is like ridiculous. Also, in a game like Street Fighter 6, a character being low tier, it means something very different from a game like 5 or 4 or 3 or honestly any other Street Fighter game. And that's because Street Fighter 6... Oh, who made a video on this? Someone made a video on this, and I cannot remember who. About why 6's balance is very different from other games. And that's because... And I identified it also, like, as soon as I started watching the video, because it's something that I have been kind of aware of for a while, which is that Street Fighter 6 is a very systems-driven game. It's a, no pun intended, driven, drive. A lot of character strength in this game comes from the way that they're able to utilize the system mechanics, the universal system mechanics, namely things like drive rush, right? Or sometimes how vulnerable they are to system mechanics. If a character is really easy to drive impact, really easy to parry, something like that, right? In a game like 5, even the universal mechanics were oftentimes very much tied to... They were made like the whole V system is basically like individual character traits for every single mechanic, right? Like, everyone has unique V skills, everyone has unique V triggers, everyone pretty much gets like a unique V reversal. There's like only a couple different types, but it's like different for every character. And that means that the responsibility of being good is like rests largely on the character's kit itself. And when you play a character like Nash, I'm still not over it. When you play a character like Nash, and his V system is like the most underwhelming shit ever, where it almost feels like... Dude, Nash's V system almost feels like random. It feels completely disconnected from the rest of his character. It's like, oh, he can like delete a projectile, and he can buff up one of his special moves, this one specific special move, to do an extra hit of damage. Like, cool. That really helps the character out, Capcom. Nash is very, like, launch Street Fighter V syndrome character. What was we talking about? Yeah. In that game, like, it was very much on the individual characters to be strong. And in 6, it's still, like, the character's kit is still important. But things like the drive system can really shore up the weaknesses in their tool set. I mean, like, Zangief has, like, a dash, you know? It's not the best one. It's slower than the other characters, but he has one. He can do it. Giving those kinds of tools, those universal tools, takes a lot of the onus off of them. And I think that's why you've been seeing a lot of people winning tournaments with generally considered lower tier or more mid tier characters, and it's not just top tier Central winning characters, right? Or sorry, winning tournaments. You got like Ryu's, you've got Rashid, you've got like I think Lily won a tournament at some point recently. And like generally considered not great characters, but you could use the system. You can use the system to your advantage. And so the it's much more of an even, much more of a level playing field. So yeah, that's my thoughts on like character balance. I think twice a year for a big or a large, you know, a decent sized balance patch is good. That's my preferred thing. I kind of hope that at some point, I hope that Capcom kind of rethinks their decision to just do a once a year patch. I would like at least like one other, you know, like one more. Just to like, I think 6 months is more than enough time to make a little change, right? A little bit of change. Especially considering that there's DLC characters who I assume have not had quite as much internal testing as the main roster characters. Launch roster characters.